Our gospel lesson comes from Matthew today. I'll be reading from the 9th chapter, beginning with the 35th verse and into the 10th chapter. Listen now to these words of God. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." Then Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits, to cast them out and to cure every disease and every sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First Simon, also known as Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon, the Canaanian, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions: "Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You received without payment, give without payment." These are the words of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. O great and holy God, may the words of my mouth, may the thoughts, the meditations resting upon each one of our hearts and minds, may they all be acceptable to you as your Spirit is at work in us. Amen. Do some of you perhaps remember the 1967 movie, The Dirty Dozen? Because that old movie was one my dad liked, and because we only had one TV most of my childhood, it's a movie I saw more than once. If you've seen it, perhaps you remember that it is set in 1944 during World War II, and it's about a group of military convicts who are chosen and trained for a top-secret military operation that would disrupt the German chain of command in northern France ahead of D-Day. Lee Marvin's character, John Reisman, is an American officer who is given this difficult and dangerous mission, a mission considered to be a suicide mission for those involved. As the John Reisman character begins recruiting those who might have a chance of successfully completing the mission, he doesn't go to the cream of the crop soldiers, but instead to a military prison. He recruits 12 convicts, 5 of which were condemned to death, and the others who were all facing lengthy sentences. They are the riffraff of the army, murderers, thieves, disobedient, failures as soldiers. They are clearly not the type of individual most people would ever choose, and much less count on, to accomplish an important and dangerous mission. Most, if not all of them, were not the type of individual who would have normally agreed to such a sacrificial mission. However, they were told that those who survived would be pardoned. So each decided that the reward was worth the risk. Now, as the movie unfolds and the men are engaged in the mission, you begin to see the wisdom of choosing those dozen unlikely men. For one thing, many of them had skills that they had used in their earlier lives, which proved helpful for the demands of the risky mission. For example, one of them knew how to pick locks. Another spoke German. Another knew how to make bombs. And all of them knew the sneaky tactics that crooks seem to know. And those skills came in handy. Together, those unlikely men were trained, and in time, we begin to see within each of them a commitment to the mission and a willingness to sacrifice for the mission. Those dozen men who had been the riffraff of the army, when given a great mission and with the right guidance and support, well, they became heroes. Today's gospel reading also describes a dozen unlikely men who were chosen for a great and difficult mission. They were called by Jesus to be his inner core of disciples. There were others who shared in the mission, but the chosen 12 were central to the mission's success. They were not exactly the dirty dozen, but they were overall an unimpressive group with such diverse backgrounds and perspectives that their working together cooperatively seemed highly unlikely in the beginning. There was a tax collector named Matthew, who was despised by many because he collected taxes for the Romans, who occupied their land and ruled over them. In general, all of the other disciples despised tax collectors and considered them to be traitors to the country. There was a revolutionary soldier named Simon, who was used to carrying a weapon and who was trained to use it on traitors and other enemies of the nation. Revolutionary soldiers were not known for being level-headed, with a willingness to talk and work things out in a heated situation. And then there were the rough, around the edges, and not well-educated fishermen. And for some reason, Jesus chose several of them to be his disciples. There was nothing about the 12 that made them stand out choices. And there is nothing mentioned in Scripture to make us think that they were particularly qualified for the important mission of sharing Jesus' good news, transforming the world. We know their names. I just shared them with you. I'll share them with you again. Simon, also known as Peter, his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanian, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. When it comes to these 12 central mission figures, we know only a little about some and very little about others. Have any of you been watching the Chosen series produced by Angel Studios? Any of you been watching it or seen parts of it or some of it? Its first episode came out on December 24th of 2017. I started watching the series on my iPad early in 2021 with my mom during that last year of her life. At that time, you could only watch it online by going to Angel Studios. However, you can now stream it by way of services such as Netflix, Amazon Prime, or Paramount. You can also watch it on TV on Sunday at 8 p.m. this evening, 8 p.m. on the CW network. The series is based on the life of Jesus, but there is a clear focus on those whom Jesus chose. In other words, the disciples. I like how the series develops the disciples' characters more fully than what we are given in Scripture. The character development allows us to know them and to connect with them on a very human level. It also helps us to better see and consider the diversity of their backgrounds, their personalities, and perspectives, and the fact that their diversity likely created tension. It's clear, especially in earlier episodes, that they don't all like each other, and they clearly don't see eye to eye. To watch the Chosen series is to understand that this diversity could have prevented them from working together. And whereas the character development may not be completely accurate, it does allow us to see the dynamics of a diverse group of men coming together slowly putting aside their differences by focusing on the one who chose each one of them to work together as a part of a great mission. Early in Jesus' choosing of the 12, there is no proof that they had what it took to complete the mission to which they had been called. And there was even less proof that they could actually work together. It was Jesus' presence among them that enabled those disciples to lay aside their differences that initially seemed insurmountable. And as their love for Jesus grew, their love for one another also grew. In the series, you can see this transformation taking place, group dynamics changing, and that's when working together to accomplish the mission really becomes possible. Of course, Jesus' rather unimpressive choice of disciples shouldn't surprise us. It is consistent with how God chose people for his special purposes throughout the entire Bible. God seems to delight in choosing the most unlikely candidates to accomplish his will. From the beginning, we see God choosing Abraham, a man in his 70s, to be the father of the Hebrew nation. His wife Sarah, who was well past childbearing age, was chosen to bear a child. God chose Jacob, a man who was well acquainted with deception and manipulation, to father 12 sons. God chose Joseph, a man who was vain and, let's face it, obnoxious at times when it came to his high opinion of himself. God chose Moses, a man with poor speaking skills, and David, the youngest and most inexperienced of Jesse's sons. All of these people were unlikely choices until God chose them. And then by God's grace and God's power, transformed them into faithful mission accomplishers. God reaches down to us in love, not because of who we are and our greatness, but because of who God is and God's greatness. Jesus shares with us, like he did with his first disciples, the seemingly impossible mission of casting out unclean spirits, healing every disease and sickness, and proclaiming the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. The mission might initially seem impossible for us. And yet, unlikely people like us are not only chosen for the mission, we are empowered to be participants in Christ's transformational mission. Jesus invites us to work with him and sees each one of us for our potential rather than our past failures, our current insecurities. Jesus holds before us a vision of what we can be, rather than an image of what we have been. Jesus doesn't remind us of what we have failed to do, but instead tells us what we can do with his help. In the Gospels, we often see people being critical of Jesus because of the company he kept. And it's true that Jesus gravitated toward the people considered to be the undesirables of society. But where others see worthlessness and trouble, Jesus sees worth and great potential. When others express loathing and judgment, Jesus expresses love and forgiveness. Jesus chose 12 ordinary people who did not have extraordinary qualifications. He brought them together into a community where they learned together and supported one another. He gave them a vision of God's kingdom and a mission to make real that kingdom on earth. The mission meant doing the same things Jesus had already been doing. It was and still is about living and proclaiming the gospel of God's love and salvation. Because of Jesus, a diverse group of disciples let go of their hot-headed, troublemaking, judgmental tendencies and rose to the challenge of one great mission. This morning, as I look at you, I see people, different people, people who are different. But I also see a community of disciples with the same qualifications or lack of qualifications as Jesus' first 12 disciples. There is more than a dozen of us here, but if you consider our background, our failures, our insecurities, who among us is suited to proclaim the gospel to an unbelieving and hurting world? Who among us is qualified to insert healing where there is brokenness? Who among us hasn't failed to love others as Jesus loves us? You may not be qualified, but who among us is? And yet, Jesus' invitation to follow and take to heart the mission continues. It is extended to us. Most of us here today may not fully identify ourselves with Lee Marvin's Dirty Dozen. We haven't gotten into that much trouble. But the truth is, we carry around with us the baggage of our failures, our insecurities, our heartaches, selfishness, and fears. These things are a part of who we are, but they need not define who we are. In fact, those things may just make us uniquely qualified for the mission of Christ, the mission that Christ calls all of us to. Jesus seems to delight in taking ordinary, imperfect people who lack all the necessary qualifications and credentials, but yet who are willing to trust and to love and to go in his name. Today, as we have worshiped together, we have had the opportunity to sing praise, to hear God's word, to know God's love and challenge. And we have also had the opportunity to rejoice in the addition of 6 individuals to Christ's mission team that is the United Methodist Church of Chagrin Falls. It's now time to get serious about the mission because Jesus sends us, each one of us, out to preach, to teach, to organize and to help, to work at the food bank, to make blankets, to collect stuffed animals, to make meals, to visit the lonely, to care for the sick, to share our hope, and to be a daily expression of God's love. Through Christ, and only through Christ, you and I can move past our inadequacies, our failures, our disagreements, our dislikes, so that together we may accomplish God's great harvesting mission. That is our mission. May it be so. Amen.